lots of pastor friends who have these great called to the ministry stories. These awesome stories. You know, I had this life-changing moment at a church camp, or I went to a revival and I felt. They have these great stories that are inspiring and moving, and they are absolutely nothing like my story. Because my story is none of those things. I've shared before that we were raised what I like to call godless heathens. I found out recently, my sister cringes when I say that, but it's true. Church just wasn't on the radar for us. Just wasn't a thing. Now, don't get me wrong, we weren't terrible people. We weren't out robbing banks or kicking puppies or knocking little old ladies down in crosswalks. We weren't doing that kind of stuff. But church just wasn't on our radar. We had no real faith. And in fact, I've shared before that to be honest, we made fun of people who had faith, who talked about Jesus. Now, of course, we were a little gutless about it, so we did it behind their back, but that's who we were growing up. We didn't have the time or the inclination to bother with something like church. Well, then time passed, life moved on. I've shared before, started going to church as a young adult only because my then fiance wanted me to get to know the pastor who was going to perform our wedding. She was dutifully going, and I was like, you're kidding me. And so she convinced me to go to get to know him, and I did. Now, I only stayed there, frankly, because of her as well. We got involved more and more time passed. We had our first kid, Sam came along, more time passed, got more involved, and somewhere in the midst of that, I started feeling this tug. And at first I had no idea what it was. I've never been one to shy away from the fact that I can be a little dense. So at first I didn't know what it was, and then I began to figure out what it was, but didn't want to hear it. So I tried to ignore it because I did not want it. I just couldn't imagine. But God was calling me to the ministry, and I could not tell the difference between that and the worst idea I had ever heard in my life. So I ignored it. I fought it, like everything I could do to stay away from it. And I've shared that finally, over time, He wore me down. God wore me down. He wouldn't let up. He was relentless about it. And finally, in a last-ditch effort to get Him to just quit bothering me about it, I went to Joanne and I said, I got something I need to talk to you about. She said, I know what you need to talk to me about. And I said, oh, I seriously doubt that you do. And she said, you're being called to the ministry. Jaw drop. So finally, after we talked, I gave in. I didn't answer a call to the ministry. I gave in just to get him off my back. But to be honest, that move toward making a greater commitment to my faith was one of the best decisions I ever made. One of the best decisions I ever made. So many people, when they're faced with a challenge in their life or with a question, they ask why. We're going to continue this series where we talk about God calls us to instead ask, why not? And we're in week 3 of this 4-week series, so we wrap this up next week asking that question, why not? And week 1, we started at the most basic human level. We talked about why not face your fears. Right there in the core. That's core stuff. Last week we went out one concentric circle and we asked the question, why not deepen your faith? And I shared last week that last week and this week were very much connected to each other. So today we take another step out on that concentric circle and we ask the next step. Why not make a greater commitment? Why not face your fears? Why not deepen your faith? Why not make a greater commitment? Now, the setting for today's scripture is in the village of Bethany. That's where it takes place. Jesus has been out teaching and healing along the Jordan River, and he's got all these people following him. And in the midst of that, he gets word that Lazarus is very sick. Lazarus is his buddy Lazarus, Mary and Martha's brother. He's sick in Bethany, very sick. And the disciples go, let's go. Jesus goes, not so fast, hang on. And so they wait, and they wait. He waits 2 days, in fact, Jesus does. He waits 2 days to head out. Well, by then they have heard that Lazarus, is really bad. And the disciples are like, why are we going now? And Jesus claims three things as they leave for Bethany. He tells them right up front, Lazarus is dead. They're like, well, maybe. He's trying to help them understand. Lazarus is dead. And he's saying this before he's even going to Bethany. Lazarus is dead. However, he will be awakened. And because of that, God will be glorified. So they head to Bethany with that as their backdrop, and this is what we're hearing.
Jesus, once more deeply moved, came to the tomb. It was a cave with a stone laid across the entrance. Take away the stone, he said. But Lord, said Martha, the sister of the dead man, by this time there's a bad odor, for he has been there for 4 days. Then Jesus said, did I not tell you that if you believe, you will see the glory of God? So they took away the stone. And then Jesus looked up and said, Father, I thank you that you have heard me. I knew that you always hear me, but I said that for the benefit of the people standing here, that they may believe that you sent me. When he had said this, Jesus called in a loud voice, Lazarus, come out! The dead man came out, his hands and feet wrapped with strips of linen and a cloth around his face. And Jesus said to them, take off the grave clothes and let him go.
So Jesus gets word that his good friend Lazarus, they're close. He's close with Lazarus and Mary and Martha. He gets word that Lazarus is very sick. And he waits 2 days to even leave. 4 days before he actually gets there. Could have gotten there sooner, but didn't. Gets there 4 days late. And Martha comes out, and she hears he's coming, and she comes out to meet him, and she says, you're too late. He's dead. Imagine how she must have felt. She sent word, because she knew he'd come and do something about it. Here he shows up 4 days late, and he's dead. He missed it. I thought you were going to do it, and you missed it. Imagine the disappointment she must have felt when she comes out there. In fact, she is weeping. And Jesus is greatly touched by that. And he's not just touched by the death of Lazarus. He's very much touched by the depth of grief that he sees in his friend Martha. And so he says, take me out to the place where he's buried. Take me out to the place where he's buried. And as you know, he wasn't buried. He was interred. It was a chamber that had been cut out of the limestone rock. Body placed on some kind of a platform on a rock bed inside, and a huge stone rolled over the mouth of the tomb. Sounds amazingly familiar about something that's coming later in the story. And it's right there outside that tomb, that Jesus challenges Martha's faith. He challenges her right there in her brother's tomb. And frankly, her complaint, you're late, you missed it, he's dead. Her complaint is easy to understand. He's been dead for 4 days. He's not still maybe hanging on, maybe he's not. He's dead. He's been dead for 4 days. He's been sealed in that tomb for 4 days. In fact, I think it's the King James Version that has her saying to Jesus, methinketh, he stinketh. I think that's what she said. I could be wrong about that. But either way, Martha had to fully put her faith in Jesus at that moment. She hadn't done that, but she had to for anything else to happen. She hadn't taken the next step. She was so caught up in the grief that she kind of lost track of who she was talking to and what he could do. Had to make a greater commitment. And now the interesting thing about this part of the story is, for Jesus, raising Lazarus is the easy part. Think about that. Raising somebody from the dead is the easy part here for Jesus. The hard part is helping take away Martha's uncertainty and Martha's hesitancy so that God's glory could shine through more completely. Not just on her, but those around her. Easy to raise a guy from the dead, but hard to get Martha where he was hoping she would get. So did you notice what he does? He thanks God in advance for what hasn't even happened yet. right? We haven't seen Lazarus. We don't know that he's alive. We're still thinking he's dead. Jesus thanks God in advance for what hasn't even happened yet. The fully man part of Jesus is so confident in God's ability that he thanks him for what he hasn't even done yet. And then through the rolled stone, still sealed, he talks to a dead guy. Jesus talks to a dead guy. They roll the stone away, and he calls out to a dead guy. A singular, powerful demonstration of his authority. He talks to a dead guy. And you notice, it wasn't a suggestion. He didn't offer up a suggestion. He didn't offer up a multiple choice answer. It's a command. He doesn't say, if you feel like it, come out, or you could come out, or you could. He says, Lazarus, come out. It's a command that he throws out there. It's immediate. It had to be startling for the people who were standing there. There had to be a collective holding of the breath when he called that out. Because they didn't know what was going to happen, but I'm not sure that that's what they expected, was he was just going to shout that out. So I can picture everybody holding their breath when Jesus calls that out. And then Lazarus, 4 days dead, comes to the mouth of the tomb. He appears in the mouth of the tomb, so freshly resurrected that the grave clothes are still on him. It's interesting, if you Google Lazarus, you find a variety of pictures like the one I have up here. 2 of them I found, it literally looked like the old Boris Karloff mummy. He was coming out like this. I thought, that's not how I picture that. But he is so newly resurrected that the grave clothes are still hanging on him. And Jesus tells the people, he gets them involved. Unwrap him, let him loose. How powerful is that? A dead guy hears the voice of his shepherd, and he comes to life. He comes back to life, all because somebody in that crowd, his sister in this case, was willing to make a greater commitment. So maybe you're saying, okay, how do I make a greater commitment? How do I do that? It sounds great in theory. You go ahead and kick that over one, Travis. But what does it actually look like in practice? How do I get it out of my head and into my heart, that making a greater commitment? Maybe you're thinking, I know some people do when they hear make a greater commitment to the church, it's just a veiled attempt to get you to give more money to the church. That's a common thought. People go, what's the deal? What exactly are you talking about here? What's the real deal? Well, the real deal, I would say, is found in the United Methodist Liturgy for New Members. Of all places, you know, I'm not a big liturgical guy reading things out of the book. However, the answer to that question is really found in the liturgy for the membership vows of the United Methodist Church. Because there are a group of basic questions. If you've seen me bring a new member in, you've heard them. I ask everybody those questions. And they're asked that, and the last of those is, will you support this congregation, the ministries of this congregation? And it gives 5 ways it encourages us to support the local congregation. And that's where the answer to the question is. So we're going to take a second. We're going to walk through the 5 ways that that question gets answered. Here's the first one. Go ahead, Travis. Prayers. It says through your prayers, right? That's the very first thing it says. And maybe you're thinking, well, I don't pray to church. I pray to God. I go, good. That's a good thing. That's a good thing. The membership vows don't encourage you to pray to the church. They encourage you to pray for your church. And that's a big difference. That's a big difference. So my question is, do you do that? Do you do that? Do you pray for your church regularly? Do you regularly pray for the leadership of your church? And that does not just mean me. That does not just mean paid staff at all. It means the leadership of the church. Because whether you are aware of the structure or not, there are an awful lot of people. Some paid staff, some incredibly devoted volunteers, but there's an awful lot of people that make this church go, that are the leadership of the church. Pray for the church earnestly and sincerely, every day. Pray that we would continue to set aside as individuals any petty differences we have, any little nitpicky personal preferences, that we would not get so wrapped up in those things that how a particular room should be used or how a particular ministry should happen, that we don't get so wrapped up in those things as individuals that we miss the big picture. And again, the big picture is right on that banner, right there. We exist to connect people to Jesus Christ. It doesn't say anything about color of the carpet or what song we pick or how a room is. It says we exist to do that. So we measure everything by that. That's what we should be praying about for our church. Because to be honest, and I've shared with you, scorn. I've been using that word a lot. But to be honest, your personal preference and mine, I'll throw myself in there, our personal preferences about how the church should be run, and $1 will buy you any size drink out of McDonald's. That's really how important our individual preferences are to the larger understanding of the church. So the first one is prayers. The second one is presence. And that's P-R-E-S-E-N-C-E, not P-R-E-S-E-N-T-S, like birthday presents. It's presence. And it simply means being there. That's really what that word means. Showing up physically, emotionally, spiritually. It means being more than a 1 hour a week Christian. Now, I'm not trying to get you to commit to be a part of everything this church does, because frankly, if you look at the church calendar, we're in kind of the slow period, and yet there's a lot of stuff on the church calendar. I'm not insinuating that you have to be at everything this church does. Frankly, I'm a pastor, and I'm not at everything this church does. It's not physically possible. What it does mean is support the ministries of the church. Support them by actively participating in at least some of them. For instance, during the school year, do you come to Wednesday night fellowship dinners on Wednesday night? If not, how come? You got to eat dinner. You're going to eat dinner Wednesday night anyway. Why not come here? Let somebody else cook it for you, serve it to you, clean up after you. You get to eat the church family, and even if you don't stay for something else, you still devoted pretty much the exact same amount of time to dinner. You just didn't have to put nearly the effort in, and you get to hang with your church family for an hour. So there's that. Do you attend Sunday school? Do you attend any kind of a Bible study? If not, how come? There are 168 hours in a week, and I wonder, what are we doing the other 167 hours a week that we're not sitting in here for an hour? What are we doing that's so important that keeps us from participating in other ministry opportunities? So prayers, presence. The next two I lumped together a bit. I pulled them apart to keep them together. Go ahead, Travis. Gifts and service. Gifts and service. So they go hand in glove. So we're going to talk about them together. This one's the easy one to say, well, that's just a fancy way of saying money. Because I see the word gifts there, Pastor, and I get it. That's just about saying money. And in part, you're right. It is. In part, this one is about giving money, but only in part. Gifts does refer to monetary donations, absolutely. And I am not going to lie, those are important. Those are important. Monetary donations are important because we have an ever-growing list of ministries. And it's not a competition. It's not just to see how many we can do, but we try to see a need, somebody here. That's how almost every new ministry starts. Somebody comes to me and they go, we're not really reaching these people, but I have an idea. That's how almost every new thing here starts. And that list continues to grow. And those ministries cost money. They just do. They just cost money. And like most churches during the summer, giving goes down in the summer. It just happens. It happens every summer. You can set your watch by it. Absolutely. Donations slow down because people tend to be more absent in the summer. But the truth is the budget doesn't slow down in the summer. Because we have a yearly budget and we divide it by 12. That's really the only logical approach. And those commitments are due every month. Period. Regardless of anything else that a church does. So are gifts in this context about money? Yes. But gifts are also about so much more than money. They're about those unique, God-given talents that each of us have. And before you argue in your head, nope, I don't have any talent, that's not true. I don't know, I may not know what yours is, but God has gifted each one of us specially to do something for Him. He's given it to us to be shared. That's the thing. We're given these gifts to share them to further His kingdom. To further His kingdom. So that part of the gifts leads directly to service. Gifts and service. And as the good old Mr. Rogers in the announcement video said, you have a paper in your bulletin. And that is a marvelous way to share the gifts that God has given you. And so my question is, how will you respond to that? How will you respond to that sheet that's in your bulletin about ministry and mission opportunities coming up in the next year? Maybe some responses are, oh, yeah, that thing. No, pass. That's one common response. Another is, oh, yeah, that. No, I usher. I usher 1 month a year, so that's a total of 4 whole hours a year that I give, so I'm done. Pass. Another one might be, yeah, I feel kind of cold to that one, but I'm sure somebody else will do that one. Pass. Those are common human responses. But whatever excuse that we might have for not being willing to take the leap of faith and volunteer a little more, I have a question. Do you like the fact that your church is growing and stretching and reaching out and thriving and trying to do more for the kingdom? And if not, how come? How come? Because that's our mission, to connect people to Jesus Christ. And if you do like the fact that the church is doing that, then you realize that reaching more people takes more people to have that happen. So this year, as you look at that sheet, don't leave it to somebody else to do. Be the somebody else who says, you know what? I feel God calling me, and I can devote the time that this asks for. I'm going to take this leap of faith. I'm going to make a greater commitment this year. And then the fifth one is witness. Witness. This one's been added in more recent years, recent enough that when we started in the ministry, it wasn't part of the membership vows. It's been added since then. This one might be the hardest one. Witness scares the daylights out of a lot of people when they hear the word. It's not necessarily preaching on street corners. We have people here who have done that, love to do it, excel at it. That's awesome. But that's not necessarily what witness means for everybody. It's not necessarily stopping total strangers in the mall and asking them if they know Jesus. That might be out of your comfort zone, I'm going to guess. It's more about openly living your life in a way that self-identifies you as a follower of Christ. How do you live your life? And more importantly, what do people see? What they hear is important, but what they see is even more important, I think. What's your daily life like? In a given week, what's your daily life like? If your attitude and your behavior and your language Monday through Saturday are different than how you are when you walk in this building, the obvious question is, why? How come? How come? If you clean up your language when you walk in church but nowhere else, why is that? Why is that? If you complain about, or heaven forbid, show bigotry towards some particular group of people all week long out there, when you see something on TV that makes you mad, or you read something and you begin to lump people together and show a non-Christian attitude toward them out there all week long, and then you walk here and here on Sunday and you say, love God, love neighbor, well, that's more than a little disingenuous of us, and yet we all tend to do that. If your go-to response during the week out there tends to be anger and bitterness, if you find yourself getting mad and kind of snapping at people and throwing things out just because they said something all week long, that doesn't balance with what you hear in here on Sunday, I hope, does it? So does your life, does the way you live your life during the week make people want to find out more about God? Because they're watching. They know. People go, yeah, they go to church, and they're paying attention. Doesn't mean you're under a microscope, but they're watching how you live your life. So, the way you live your life during the week, does it make more people want to find out more about God? Or does it simply reinforce society's overall notion that all of us Christians are really just self-righteous and judgmental? Because there's enough Christians who make us appear that way anyway, that we don't need the extra help. So then, if your question is, why should I make a greater commitment to my faith? And you can go ahead and go to the next one, Travis. Why should I make a greater commitment to my faith? God says, why not? Somebody shared with us this week that they had a question come up, and they said, why? And their spouse turned to them as in direct relation to what we've been talking about and smiled and said, why not? That's God's response. And we say, why? God says, why not? Why not? As we said last week, let's see. Well, it makes us a better person. We find a peace that passes all understanding. We find comfort in the midst of the storm. I don't see a downside to strengthening our commitment. Because again, what could we possibly be doing the other 167 hours a week that is so important that we couldn't give back just a little bit more of those hours to God as a way of saying thank you? A way of helping reach out and connect more people to Him. Because it seems to me, in my approach to math, if connecting 272 people a week, which is what we're currently averaging for weekly worship average attendance, if connecting 272 people a week to God is good, and boy would I argue that that's good, well, simple math would tell me that connecting 544 people a week is twice as good. It just makes good sense to me that if 272 is good, 544 must be twice as good. Why not make a greater commitment? Why not? Individual commitment to a group effort is what makes a team work. And we are a team. We are the family of God, the body of Christ, here at the Aledo United Methodist Church. Would you pray? Father God, I thank you. I thank you that you